Hilarious Hillbillies, the birth of television's Beverly Hillbillies. We drove to Abraham Lincoln's cabin and visited the battlefields of historic places, television writer Paul Henning reflected. As was often the case, during this trip in the late 1950s, his fertile imagination busily concocted colorful scenarios to help relieve the boredom of the open road. Sharing his vision, he told his family, "Imagine someone from that Civil War era sitting here in this car with us, going 60 miles an hour down a modern highway." As he considered it, he realized the humor that could arise from the misunderstandings the time traveler might have about contemporary society. That daydream was the germ of a television program that would make most critics turn up their noses. But the show, the Beverly Hillbillies, would also plaster smiles on the faces of over 50 million viewers every week. He soon realized the concept wouldn't require introducing someone from the past, but simply somebody who wasn't familiar with modern conveniences. Henning's thoughts traveled back to his days as a Boy Scout in his home state of Missouri. He had attended a scout camp near the Arkansas border. The leaders would take the scouts on long hikes into the woods where they would often run across folks who lived a very basic life. "I found there were pockets of people who resisted modernization," he recalled. All he would need to do, Henning mused, was to transport some of them to a bustling city to have the same effect as bringing in people from the past. First, he considered New York City, but decided it would cost too much to film there. Besides, he and his family were firmly rooted in Los Angeles and didn't want to move. Beverly Hills, he decided, would be perfect. During the months ahead, his hazy daydream began to crystallize into a concrete program idea. Soon he would have the opportunity to pitch it to some CBS television executives. Through the years, Henning had worked his way up the entertainment ladder, first in radio script writing, then television. He and his future wife, Ruth Barth, had teamed up at Kansas City's KMBC radio, co-writing and acting out country-themed serials like Happy Hollow and Life on the Red Horse Ranch. In 1928, the station became part of the Columbia Broadcasting System. Separately, both Paul and Ruth transferred to CBS in Chicago to work for several radio shows, including Fibber McGee and Molly. By the next year, their partnership had turned romantic. They married and moved to the studio's Los Angeles headquarters. During the next 20 years, Paul became firmly entrenched in the California radio and television field, while Ruth turned her attention toward their growing family. He wrote for Eddie Cantor, Rudy Vallee, and George Burns and Gracie Allen. His successful reputation as a writer slowly elevated him to the status of a respected voice in the company. As a result, during a meeting in 1959, a programming executive asked him if he had any ideas for a future television show. In response, Paul crossed his fingers and pitched his recent vision of backwoods characters transported into a modern city. After he had finished, he looked tentatively around the table, fearful he would see perplexed gazes. Instead, he was greeted with nodding heads and growing smiles. Over the next couple years, those nods and smiles transformed into financial and production support for his pet project. As Henning's imagination shifted into high gear, the program's characters began to materialize. They could be a family from the secluded hill country of the Ozarks, like those he had met on his scout hikes. From the start, he knew exactly who he wanted to portray Jed Clampett, the head of the household, Buddy Ebsen. Henning had been watching him play the sidekick, George Russell, on Disney's Davy Crockett and felt he made the perfect hillbilly. Ebsen's acting career reached back years before this hillbilly period to his song and dance premiere in Broadway Melody of 1936. 3 years later, he was selected to play the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. Ray Bolger, originally cast as the Tin Man, decided he wanted to switch to the Scarecrow. Ebsen didn't have a problem with that and traded with him. Unfortunately, after several days in rehearsal, he developed a severe allergic reaction to the metal dust in the Tin Man makeup and had to be replaced. Over 20 years later, though, his standout role as Jed Clampett more than made up for his loss. Henning briefly considered creating the role of a mother for Jed in the character of Daisy Mae Clampett, or Granny. Then he realized she would be the matriarch of the family, and he wanted Jed to be the head of the clan. No problem, he thought. Granny can be Jed's mother-in-law. His first choice for the role was actually veteran actress Bea Benaderet. He was a little concerned, however, that she didn't fit the physical look he had in mind for Granny, since Bea was a little busty. Bea agreed and suggested her friend Irene Ryan for the role. Like Benaderet, Ryan had made her mark in radio and television through the years. An observer of Ryan's tryout said that when she read for the role, with her hair all tied back in a bun and feisty as all get-out, both the executive producer, Al Simon, and Henning blurted out, "That's Granny." Benaderet was later assigned the role of Jed's cousin, Pearl Bodine, and eventually starred as Kate Bradley on Petticoat Junction. Jed's only child, Ellie Mae, wasn't feisty like Granny, but despite her pin-up girl appearance, she was quite the tomboy. In fact, she could wrestle just about any fellow to the ground. Despite this, she had a soft heart, especially when it came to the critters she gathered around her like fuzzy family members. Selected from among 500 others, Louisiana-born actress Donna Douglas fit Ellie Mae's role perfectly. Reflecting on her audition, she remembered they tied up a goat on the set and asked her if she could milk it. "Well, I'd never milked a goat in my life," she confided, "but I said, sure, I can milk that goat." This bold answer, even if untrue, snagged her the role. "Over the 9 years, I probably worked with over 900 animals," she recalled. "Ellie didn't kiss a lot of men, but she sure kissed a lot of critters." The critters weren't the only ones to admire the blue jean-clad beauty. Donna Douglas has done more for the sale of blue jeans, a Levi executive once declared, than cowboys have done in 100. And, of course, the family would not have been complete without Jethro Bodine, the son of Jed's cousin Pearl. Actor Max Bayard Jr. was the ideal choice for the role. Though his character Jethro wasn't rocket science material, his family proudly boasted of his 6th grade education. This higher education, Jethro figured, should net him a good job. In various episodes, he tried to parlay it into the prerequisite for an Air Force general, psychiatrist, and brain surgeon. In most cases, however, his interest in these elusive professions stemmed from pretty girls he might impress with the titles. He not only loved girls, he loved all things edible, leading Jed to label him the 6-foot stomach. Surrounded by unforgettable characters like Miss Hathaway and Milburn Drysdale, the Clampett clan forged their way into television history. As they did, critics from coast to coast sharpened their pencils and their tongues, labeling them everything from a desert in television's vast wasteland to painful to sit through. One critic, however, tempered his tone. TV Guide's Gilbert Seldes noted, "The whole notion on which the Beverly Hillbillies is founded is an encouragement to ignorance." But then he added, "But it is funny. What can I do?"